Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 8th session of the webinar series on massive open online courses, design and development issues. I am Sanjay Mishra from the Commonwealth of Learning. With me, my co-host, Professor Dr. Fong Sung Phuc from University Malaysia, Sabah. We have our esteemed guest today, Sheila Jagannathan from the World Bank. Sheila is head of the Open Learning Center at the World Bank. She has over 30 years of experience in education technology in a number of countries around the world. I have the privilege of having known her for quite some time now, and we have a common passion for using technology for improving student learning, and particularly learning for development. And that's what makes our interest very common. Welcome, Sheila, and thank you very much for joining us today on this webinar series that we are doing. We are privileged. And before I request Dr. Fong to give a small brief, I would like to tell every one of you, those who have joined today, happy Eid Mubarak to all of you for joining us on this auspicious day and during this auspicious period. And we are looking forward to the presentation from Sheila and taking forward our learning. The overall objective of this session is to learn what is World Bank doing on the field of massive open online courses and how they're tackling global issues. Dr. Fong, few words from you.
Thank you, Dr. Sanjaya. Greetings from Sabah. To all my fellow colleagues in the University of Malaysia Sabah of the Muslim faith. In Malaysia, we say Selamat Hari Raya Aidilfitri. So enjoy your moments with your family. Thank you, Dr. Sanjaya, once again for making this special arrangement. And thank you, Dr. Sheila Jagannathan, all the way from Washington. And Dr. Sheila, I believe is 12 hours difference from Sabah at the moment. So we are now 8:30 a.m. while you are 8:30 p.m. on the 24th. Anyway, we look forward to your sharing concerning your experience in World Bank Open Learning Campus. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Fong. Thank you, Sanjaya Mishra, and for giving me this opportunity to share lessons and experiences from the World Bank's learning, especially MOOCs. But I want to start off with thanking all of the participants, wishing you a very happy Eid Mubarak, and thank you for being here on such an auspicious day for you. So I want to start off a little bit by saying that since COVID, before COVID, there's an interesting statistic that says, as of February 2020, 3% of the world was learning online. It's a pretty small number, but it was still only 3%. Today, 100% of us are learning online, and also mostly 100% of us are also working remotely. As you know, there's a huge uptake of learning, and learners are coming because they have the time to upskill themselves, to upgrade their jobs, and so on and so forth, because working from home gives you a little bit more of the luxury of time. But I wanted to mention that I have been listening to and participating in panels, with many people all over the world around online learning. And I think what is this form of blended learning that we're going to talk about, whether MOOC is the focus or other form of digital learning blended with other virtual tools, is going to become the new normal, even after we get all of us, get back to so-called the old way of doing things. I think blended learning is going to stay, and as some form of blended remote work is also going to stay. So I just wanted to share that. So I have 30 minutes to talk, and then we will use about 20 to 25 minutes to take questions from you through chat and or directly to me. I'm very happy to do that. So very quickly, I'm going to talk about what are we doing, the World Bank doing immediately for COVID responses to country. Then talk a little bit about the World Bank Group's Open Learning Campus and how we already reimagined about 10 years ago this digital and blended learn style. Talk a little bit about MOOC examples and approaches. Talk about the 9 key lessons that I had culled out I thought might be interesting to share, and talk a little bit as well about the challenges we are facing and so on. So moving ahead, COVID responses, we're working in 4 main areas. I'll go a little bit fast because you do have the slides. But as of today, we have reached out to 100 countries, the World Bank Group has. One area of work is building, saving lives by helping client country implement emergency health operations, strengthening health facilities, and so on. The other one is around helping countries protect the poorest and most vulnerable, expand the reach of social protection, tackling food shortage, and so on. Saving lives and businesses, as 4 out of 5 people in the global workforce are currently affected fully or partially by closures. And finally, while all of this is happening, think a little bit long term to build more resilient recovery and equitable growth when the crisis subsides. And for all of these, while the World Bank Group is providing loans and packages, operational packages in these 4 main areas, we're also designing capacity building programs to support what the operational groups are doing to support the financial commitments on responses to economic recovery, healthcare, sanitation, and infrastructure. So very quickly, you might say, why does the World Bank Group care about learning? So poverty is still a huge challenge, and about 1.2 billion people continue to live in extreme poverty. So business as usual is no longer an option. And several years ago, the senior management of the World Bank developed 2 ambitious goals to guide the work over the next 10 years or so. One, to end extreme poverty by reducing the percentage of people living on $1.25 a day to 3% by 2030, and then promote shared prosperity, which is making sure that the bottom 40%, lower bottom of the pyramid, also have sustained growth. So to make all of this happen, this vision calls for new approaches to learning and capacity building, to innovation and collaboration. And so what the earlier, so knowledge and learning become front and center of this approach. Evidence-based, integrated, multi-sectoral knowledge that combine local and global solutions, that's focused not so much on theory and academics, but more on implementation, getting real-time feedback, and delivering results. So this is to give you an idea why World Bank. So with that goal in mind, about 7 years ago, the World Bank, we launched what is called the Open Learning Campus. It's an ecosystem of learning with 2 goals. One, to make sure that our staff in over 120 country offices globally are cutting edge in the thematic areas like energy, water, infrastructure, health, urban, and so on. But also that the lessons learned that World Bank Group is working in almost every developing emerging country, and out of these come lessons of what worked, what didn't, and why. And so the goal is that these lessons are then dynamically captured and offered to all of the countries in the world who are embarking on this reform into accessible learning. So that's what we did. So prior to launching the Open Learning Campus, I piloted something called E-Institute just for a few sectors and just for client learning, and it really took off. So the president then gave us a mandate to cover all of the 14 sectors we work on. And when we mean sectors, again, it's health, urban, etc. We have broad clusters like sustainable development, human development, infrastructure, macro economics and jobs. And then we have cross-cutting themes like gender, climate change, and so on. So basically what the illustration on this slide at the bottom says is, even in 2011, we were doing 95% face-to-face in Washington or in the regions, regional hubs, and 5% some sort of video conference or e-learning. Today, client learning is maybe even 98% blended and only about 2 to 5% face-to-face. So because of implementing a structure like the Open Learning Campus, that was also one of the reasons why we were able to pivot very quickly to fully online because we had the infrastructure and the support systems and the content and so on, etc. So what the Open Learning Campus was built keeping in mind the way people learn in today's context, which is not sitting in a classroom listening to long lectures, but learning continuously. And so the OLC, we created it as 3 to 4 schools. You see 3 schools, but we have an additional school just for staff. So we have TED-like talks, which is short bursts of knowledge just in time. Multimedia and storytelling are critical here, but podcasts and games and apps and TED-like talks and so on and so forth. So short bursts of knowledge, micro-learning, if you will. And then we have the academy, which is the deeper learning. And this is around MOOCs, self-paced, purely self-paced courses, facilitated courses, which are what I call the smaller MOOCs because they have everything that is a MOOC, but it's not so large. We'll talk about it in a minute, as well as face-to-face and so on. And now we're virtual blends, right? And so you replace the face-to-face with virtual learning and still have the self-paced and the social and so on and so forth. We have something called Connect, which is a place where people have problem-solving conversations. So a mayor in Barcelona could be talking to a mayor in Mumbai, New York, and exchanging ideas, or a municipal official can do the same thing, talk about what are the problems they're having, how is the other person solving it. And so it's a form of continuous learning. And for the staff only, in addition to these 3, we also have something called on-the-job learning, where you have virtual and collaborative spaces, for people to actually learn on the job. Obviously, we can't do this for our client. OLC also I wanted to mention is multi-format, and it has this sort of Netflix, Amazon experience of rating courses and personalized recommendation and so on. I'd encourage you, if you want to learn more, to go to olc.worldbank.org, and we're constantly catering to learning. And I want to say here that the target audience for the Open Learning Campus are policymakers and practitioners and other actors working in development, including NGOs, including private sector. And then for some of the MOOCs and so on, which have more broader applicability, it could also be the general citizen or champion, the youth, and so on. So the reason for launching such an Open Learning Campus, there were some internal drivers. Internally, as I said, we wanted a place of continuous learning for distributed staff who were in over 120 countries. Clients were also saying, look, we want not to come to Washington once a year, the policymakers, but we want to learn all the time and have flexibility and accessibility. We also wanted to reduce costs and have productivity gains. That's the internal drivers. The externally, the development landscape was changing. This slide talks to you about the key drivers here, such as globalization, urbanization, climate, disruptions and fragility. These were the development needs. And this is the reason why we launched such an Open Learning Campus, because it was really crucial for our partners and clients and policymakers to learn all the time. Now I will jump to talking about the types of MOOCs the bank does. And as you're well aware, you're in the 8th session of the MOOC, so you know the different types of MOOCs. One is the MOOC which is more raising awareness and having, lectures and information provided to them. But then there's another type of MOOC that focuses on community, more connectivist type of MOOC, which focuses on community and connection. And really what I wanted to tell you, and as you will see in subsequent slides, is we kind of blended the two types of MOOC into the World Bank Group's approach to MOOCs. These are the examples. So I want to say that we differentiate MOOC into two types these days. So when the World Bank, there is need to raise awareness on why a 4-degree warmer world is necessary, or a new framework on development of financing, where a very, very large group of people's awareness needs to be raised and a call for action, or they need to be sensitized on maternal health care or water and sanitation. So we use MOOCs for this large awareness raising. And so you'll see the first one on climate change in English, French, and Spanish, reached initially 60,000 people, but growing. We have one on public-private partnerships, another one on financing for development. Last year, and many of you may know that the World Bank puts out one flagship report called the World Development Report. And usually we convert the World Development Report, which is usually a 300 to 400 or anywhere from 200 to 400 page document, dense with text and visuals. We convert it into a 4 to 5 week interactive participatory MOOC. So in addition to that, these days we're also doing some smaller facilitated MOOCs, which is ongoing. And so we might launch a MOOC on, let's say, public-private partnership in this big way, which is cohort based. So I'm just making it up. No, actually, I'm not making it up. We are going to launch a MOOC on supply chain, August 16th. It'll go until September 20th. But what will happen after that is that we will put it into edX as a self-paced variety with very light facilitation, and it will continue. So this is just to give you an idea. So the key feature of these MOOCs, and I'll keep coming back to it when we talk about lessons. But the key feature of this MOOC is that we offer 2 tracks, which is which I feel is, at least when we started, was a little bit unique. So we offer a development practitioner track, which is very important audience for us. And then we offer a general champion track. So of course, there are video lectures and so on and so forth, but we focus a lot around connectivists, creating community, having people discuss on forums and so on. And I'll break this down. This is another MOOC that I wanted to quickly highlight. So a lot of social media, YouTube Hangouts, Twitter chats, and I will discuss, we introduced something innovative to have action learning, for them to learn the principles of the MOOC and apply it to their own context. So I will talk about that as well in the lessons. And this is an example of how this was also a World Development Report. So the whole digital development and how dividends and how emerging countries can take advantage of the digital transformation and so on. Very quickly, learner characteristics. Almost 2,000 of learners are from emerging countries, highly educated. You can see the age group. Majority of them were working and taking the MOOC, and most of them said that the overall relevance, quality, facilitator knowledge, etc., was rated high. And so this gives a breakdown of developed versus developed economies. And what I wanted to say here was, these are the areas that the World Bank works in: equitable finance, human development, sustainable development, and infrastructure. Within that, we have various categories, and most of our MOOCs are here. And it is open and free, not just our MOOCs, but everything on the Open Learning Campus. So I'd encourage you and your students to take avail of this. Point here I'm making is that the technology and the compression techniques have improved so much that most of our learning, including MOOCs, we get 20% of participants from Africa. So lesson number 1, a lot of people will come to me, since I support capacity building 30 departments. They'll say, I want a MOOC, when it may not be a MOOC that is suitable for their needs, for their audience. And so it's very important for you to looking at the a concept note or some kind of understanding of what they're trying to achieve, decide whether it's a MOOC or maybe it's a facilitated e-learning courses, maybe it's a bite-sized, and so on. From our experience, where MOOC has been very useful, is that it provides a cost-effective way to reach a large and wide development community, raise their awareness, share lessons, sensitize them on issues, facilitate consensus. But I don't, I think when you, from our case, because we have 30, 40, 50,000 attending, sort of high level of complex skill building, I might say MOOC is not the most effective. And there I would use all of the features of a MOOC-like experience, but create a facilitated course where there are smaller cohorts and the proportion of facilitators and learners is much less, so that people can actually look at their work, comment on it, have an action learning approach. So the second lesson is, of course, and I'm going to quickly pass through this, look at your MOOC platform. We used Udemy for a certain reason, but largely we are now using Coursera. Largely we are using edX, and but we also work with Coursera and FutureLearn that is available in Europe. But, I'm sure you have all discussed with Dr. Fong and Sanjaya the decisions on which MOOC to use and what are their attributes and so on. The third is that I generally think that because MOOC is relatively expensive and time commitment, you need a broad stakeholder buy-in. I insist on some sort of concept note and concept review that talks about the context and relevance of why a MOOC for this particular activity, who is the audience and how many do we want to expect, what are the key objectives you wish to achieve, the outcomes, what would be the structure of modules, is content going to be created from scratch, what are the sources of content, what are the expected outcomes and results. Also look at risks and ways to mitigate them. Sustainability, how are you going to keep this active? Resources and timeline, and advisory group. So we have a core group and external and internal. It may be different for you, but the overall idea is a concept review, concept note, and a concept review is critical, I have found. Next, third lesson, invest in a good pedagogical strategy, because MOOC is not just about putting videos online and having it. I'm sure you have discussed this quite a lot. As I mentioned to you, our strategy has been to link up the awareness raising type of MOOCs with the connectivist and constructivist. So we have video lectures by world-class experts, short readings, assignments, including peer review assignments and so on. But then we invest a lot into peer-to-peer learning. Particularly for us, that is huge, because everybody who's attending is a developing practitioner, and they have a wealth of knowledge to share. So learning from the peer is almost as huge as learning from the experts. And so activities need to be designed for peer learning with rubrics, one of the group assignments. One of the things, and I will talk again with you about it, is this whole active learning, so we try to say at the end of it, create a digital artifact which does not use just text but multiple media to show what you have learned, or to show how you will apply this learning in your country context. And I'll share with you some examples. And then, of course, a lot of connections through discussion forums, YouTubes, and Twitter, and so on. So 4 pillars of the MOOC experience: the video lectures, the interactive exercises, the peer assignments, and the community. So how does it work? So in terms of lectures, we go for high production value, and this is what makes it a bit expensive, but no more than 15 minutes. If you have to split it into multiple clips, and we also get it subtitled in the 6 official World Bank group languages. So this gives you an example of the world's top experts on future of MOOC, and we had 14 of them in the future of work MOOC. In terms of interactive exercises broadly, of course, we have the standalone quizzes, but rather than multiple choice, we use small caselets and make people take roles and respond to it. We also invest in video quizzes so that while they're watching the 15-minute, there are 1 or 2 interaction points where we ask people to reflect or to respond to question. And then, of course, assignments, which I will come back to in a minute. Some of the innovative pedagogy we have also introduced is small games. So when we did a MOOC on Risk Horizon, we developed a small game that people will play to see the ramifications of risk. It's like a simulation. So people enjoyed that very much. We also do something called visual pathways, which is a gamified sort of learning experience to show people what they have finished in each week, what are the points they have received, and so on. In addition, we do something called the Course Hero, whereby we call attention to people when they have completed the maximum number of discussion posts, contributed innovative ideas, completed the quiz. So keeps up, again, in the spirit of gamification, keeps up the momentum, badges, and so on and so forth. Peer assessments, largely, given that you have 50,000 or 40,000 participants and maybe 5 experts, you do need peers to grade it. And here I would say creating a rubric is very, very important for peers to grade it. And the rubric needs to clearly explain what is it that you will grade and the point system and so on and so forth, so that it can be done in a calibrated peer review. And so by doing this, we avoid the tensions of people not feeling that they got graded correctly and so on. So creating the rubric with steps and criteria for evaluation are critical, depending on what it is that the assignment is about. And this just gives you an idea of one of the activities where in this MOOC on climate change, we asked them to review 3 articles and then write a 400-word review about the strengths and weaknesses of one of the articles. And then we give the peer reviewer a link to a rubric whereby points are assigned. So that is that. So here, look at the points. The points are on scientific credibility, around whether it is appropriate for the audience, whether it's easy to read, and the thoroughness, the comprehensiveness of the argument. So that is that. The other thing is, interesting e-discussions, and we end up having thousands and thousands of people participating in a MOOC's e-discussion. And I'll come to it again later, but we do facilitate. So somebody is watching over this discussion, contributing interesting ideas, summarizing every day, summarizing every week. And remember, I mentioned the peer learning happens a lot through these e-discussions. And let me move on. So, and in addition, these are augmented by Twitter, as well as live meetups, although the World Bank doesn't organize the meetup. That's up to individual learners to do it. We do organize video hangouts 2 or 3 times during the MOOC. So the hangouts are a very powerful feature, I have noticed, because it's basically like a video conference or a virtual Zoom chat. But what it is that we generally do it at the end of the first week of the MOOC to kind of do a couple of things. One, infuse new ideas, bring in experts so they can talk to experts in real time, but also to clarify any misconceptions, to add value through finding out how they want the rest of the week to go. So usually in a 5-week MOOC, we may have 2 or 3 such hangouts. And the challenge, of course, is that because it's global, sometimes finding the right moment to do this is a challenge. Sanjay, I'll take another 5 minutes and then move to questions.
Oh, yes, go ahead.
So this, sure, this is the digital artifact. This is what I was talking to you about as a way for participants. They're not just listening to lectures and discussing and participating. What we want them to do at the end of the day is go away with the key ideas from the MOOC applied to their context. So in many cases, participants actually create digital artifact. I'll tell you one story which has touched my heart, and we've written about it, is when we did the Why is a 4-degree warmer world to be avoided, a MOOC on climate change. A professor from the Caribbean, he wrote a song, he strummed it on the guitar, and he created a small video of how he would take the learnings from the MOOC and teach the local communities. So this was a very sort of something that will be remembered when we're saying we don't want you to write a report, or we don't want you to do something, but we want you to really take the key ideas and transform and let us know through multimedia, not text only, how you will apply it to your country context. So we've had some incredible examples, and sometimes we've even followed up occasionally with financing if the example's very good. But the idea of the digital artifact is that it's transferable across situations and contexts. It is, it allows the learner to really hone in on what they've learned, reflect on it, and take the key ideas and create this communication that they can then apply to their country context. Lesson number 6. We found, and I'm sure you all know, putting a MOOC together is not just the subject expertise, but it requires a lot of interdisciplinary teams, such as, of course, learning design, but visual design, multimedia production, facilitation, huge, programming, technical support, and so on. So this is something that a lot of people think you can quickly take some video and put it online and it becomes a MOOC. I'm not talking about you because this is your 8th session and I'm sure you're putting a lot into it, but I wanted to add that. The next lesson is also we found that we've invested particularly in many of the MOOC platforms. Their interface is not as user-friendly and clear as we would like to have. So we invested in creating a sort of attractive and intuitive user interface with proper instructions and so on. This was particularly important in early days of the MOOC, but even now. And we find that that leads to less technical support and so on. The other very critical thing for us is, when you open up a MOOC, a lot of the academic MOOCs are not very effectively facilitated. There are some TAs around, but we end up putting some world-class experts as facilitators. We may have experts as facilitators, and then we may have some more junior staff on the logistics facilitation. So the idea of the expert is that they would prepare and post the announcement. They would, as I said, mentor and coach learners, infuse new interests by bringing new case studies. Sometimes topics can be controversial, so they will clarify things, and they'll also enable the participants to take the key lessons from the MOOC and convert it into practical implications for their country or project context. So as well as they will join the Hangouts and provide content expertise. Of course, the logistic facilitators more send out reminders, take care of tech support and this and that. But in this case, I find that having experts there, behind the scenes, mentoring, coaching, and guiding is very valuable to improve the learning effectiveness. Marketing is also huge, given that we end up spending a lot of time and effort on the MOOC. A good communication strategy, a consistent branding, calling out to the target audience. So as I told you, we're launching the MOOC on supply chain, and I have a team really working on a good communication strategy that enables a two-way engagement with the MOOC audience. So, and also trying to make it as multilingual as possible, making sure that we can get all of the regions of the world. The World Bank operates in 6 regions: South Asia, East Asia, and the Pacific, Europe and Central Asia, Africa, Middle East and North Africa, and Latin America and the Caribbean. So this is a challenge for us to make sure that some of the MOOCs, not all, are available. So I now go to some of the challenges that we still face, and it's a sort of a continuous improvement. It's not something that you design, and the iterative feedback loop is important. But increased participation does not necessarily translate to completion, and this is a common problem. We get about 25% completion because of all these interactive and participatory activities and so on. But we've also come to understand that not everybody who needs to come to the MOOC needs to complete it, because a lot of policymakers are interested in getting certain nuggets of knowledge, and when they complete it, they leave, and so that's also fine. The other thing is, access from fragile and conflict affected states, which is important for us, can be difficult. And so, or even when they need to participate in the YouTube Hangout, sometimes the sound quality is poor, and so on. So this is something that we're trying to deal with at every stage. I also feel a MOOC software itself, and I was talking to Professor Anant Agarwal, they're also investing a lot to improve compression and so on. So I hope this improves. But again, the proof of the pudding is the eating. We get 20% from Africa, so they are attending. Challenge in navigating large volumes. The discussion boards are huge, and we get so many participants, and so navigating it is both an opportunity and a challenge. Occasionally, we will find that people, since the World Bank operates in so many sectors, and many people may not agree with it, they use the MOOC as a way to sort of complain about the World Bank. And so this is very crucial role of the facilitator to make sure that this is within the boundaries, the discussion is within the boundaries of the learning objective. And as I said, the regionalization and localization is also a challenge, although nowadays we're working with regional centers of excellence for them to localize and contextualize the MOOCs. So what are we looking forward in the next year or so is more on the community building and networks of local practitioners, the opportunity to use regional, national, and global facilitators, and working with global and regional centers of excellence to deliver the localization. Again, as I mentioned, our focus is on practitioner, practical content of what works and what doesn't work, whether it's energy or urbanization or climate. And we're trying to infuse as many pedagogical techniques and constantly learning. We're trying to use learning analytics to inform course design, and also bring in the best practices. There's constantly room to improve. And also, we're fragile and conflict affected states is a very big priority for the World Bank, and we want to make sure we reach these, and we have to figure out better technology suites to do that. And also the focus is on emerging countries, but within emerging countries, 3 streams. Government and policymakers and the general public, and of course, the staff of donor organizations. So these are areas that we are working on to improve. So that is the end of my presentation. I hope we have some time to talk about the questions.
Thank you, Sheila. Thank you for your participation and the excellent presentation, which really covered a range of issues that Open Learning Center at World Bank does, and particularly the line lessons with examples. Actually, it really helped me to also understand at breadth about the activities that you are engaged in. and it was really a treat for me. And I'm sure all the participants who are attending from around the world, and particularly from University of Malaysia, Sabah, must have enjoyed this presentation as a lesson that you have gone through. And over the period of last several days, almost a month now, they have gone through this process of 8 sessions so far. This is the 8th one, and they could probably they will relate to many of the things that you talked about, starting from peer learning to rubrics, to use of short videos and so on, and the importance of the design document that you talked about, they have done. So thank you very much for your time. It's late for you in Washington, and we really appreciate, and we are obliged for your sparing time with us. Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Fang, for all the facilitation. Thanks all the participants. Thanks all the participants for joining during this holiday time. We are really, really impressed by your commitment to this the new way of teaching and learning through massive open online courses. And I do look forward to you all on the next session tomorrow. Thank you, Professor Fong.